The Prologue to Canterbury Tales by Joffrey Chaucer. For a proper understanding of the background of Chaucer's life and work, it's very important to know about the principal events, trends, and movements of this age in the political, economic, social, religious, and literary spheres. The Age of Chaucer. The period between 1340 and 1400 is known as the Age of Chaucer. It marked the first significant literary age in English literature. During this age, three kings ruled England: Edward III, Richard II, and Henry IV. The first movement shows growth of English national spirit under the reign of Edward III, beginning of Hundred Years' War. Due to this national movement, it separates England from political ties of France. It also causes regional Christian bondage to Rome. As a consequence of the territorial ambitions of Edward III, the Hundred Years' War began in 1338 between England and France. In the course of this war, Edward III secured English supremacy over the English Channel by naval victory of Scilly in 1340. Established the prestige of the English soldiery and the military supremacy of the English archers by the startling victory of Crecy in 1346 and in 1347 captured Calais. A victory was won by his son, the Black Prince, at Poitiers in September 1356. Edward III was the first king who conspicuously directed policy to commercial expansion, the security of the trade with Flanders being one of the objects of his French wars. There were strong nationalistic passions due to the Hundred Years' War between England and France. Edward III realized that it was an important duty of the government to foster foreign trade. The chief export of that time was raw wool. The other wool industries were the manufacture of cloth also began to make headway in England at this time. Another significant event of the age of Chaucer was the Black Death or plague that affected a third of country's population. There had been epidemics before, but this outbreak of 1348-49 was the worst that ever befell. Some villages were wiped out altogether. The London graveyards were soon filled. The lower classes fell by hundreds in a day. Wailing and desolation filled every city. Nearly half the people of England died, and 2 centuries passed before the population of the country again rose to what it had been before in 1348. This affected various social dynamics like limiting labor and employable bodies. Nearly all the laborers who had escaped the plague left the country. Labor was so expensive that the crops were often left to wither and the price of food rose fourfold. Landlords were compelled to pay higher wages lest they should get no crops at all. John Wycliffe, the morning star of the Reformation. He is known for the translation of Bible and earned the name of the father of English prose. During that period, the church had grown enormously wealthy, and the desire to share in its wealth attracted persons to become clergymen who had no claim to respect. Some of the monasteries were badly run. The friaries were no longer holy and unselfish, and the higher ranks of clergy, deans, and bishops often lived luxuriously, devoting themselves to worldly interests instead of to their spiritual duties. There was a general feeling that the church was becoming less and less worthy of its wealth and privileges. And this feeling was now focused by the preaching of John Wycliffe, who emerged as the chief adversary and assailant of the church. Beginning as an enemy of the vices and pretensions of the clergymen and as an advocate of their apostolic life, he went on to attack the sacerdotal theory of religion. Sacerdotal, let me spell it out: SACERDOTAL, sacerdotal theory. This sacerdotal theory claims excessive authority for the priesthood. Wycliffe organized a band of poor preachers who went about the country spreading his message. Those who were converted came to be known as Lollards. Lollards, the psalm tunes, who sing the psalm tunes. Wycliffe was condemned by the Archbishop of Canterbury for his heretical views, and the Lollards suffered by virtue of his attack on the forms of ceremonies and the malpractices in the church. Wycliffe became the forerunner of the Reformation and has been called the morning star of Reformation. Wycliffe initiated the principle of making the words of the scripture the criterion of Christian doctrine, and he translated the Bible into English, a rendering which was the basis of all later translations and which may be regarded as the first English prose classic. The last 15 years of the reign of Edward III were a lame and important conclusion after his earlier activity and success. The king became enfeebled in body and in mind, and allowed himself to be ruled by Elsprere, a woman of wit and beauty, but of bad character. In 1376, the Black Prince died, a bitterly disappointed man. In 1377, Edward III followed him to the grave, and Richard II became the king at the age of 11. During this period, there was a revolt, the Peasants' Rebellion. In the fourth year of Richard II's reign, there occurred a great revolt among the peasantry, the immediate cause of which was poll tax. The leaders of the revolt were Wat Taylor and Jack Straw. The influence of the new learning, social unrest, and the commencement of a new religious movement were thus two of the chief active forces in the England of the later 14th century. The last half of the 14th century saw the birth of the English language. Ever since the Norman conquest 1066, French had dominated the social and political life of the upper classes. But now, various circumstances combine to establish the supremacy of English. The English mind, evoked from the lethargy of bondage, and modern English literature had its birth. English prose and English poetry alike sprang to life. Joffrey Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales. About the same time appeared the works of John Wycliffe, who, as Chaucer is called the father of English verse, may justly be styled the father of English prose. Wycliffe's Bible is an example of vigorous, artless English. His controversial pamphlets illustrated the capabilities of the English language at a time when Latin was normally employed as a medium of theological discussion. Wycliffe's Bible is an important landmark in the religious, social, and literary history of England. Wycliffe made a prose a new contribution to the national language and literature. The translation is one of the first great prose monuments in English, and its wide popularity, in spite of the occasional stiff and unidiomatic translation English, rendered it influential in gaining for the vernacular a position of dignity and honor. But the great prose work of this period is a book known as The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, a translation from French. Even though a translation, this book takes its place as the first English prose classic, not taking into account Wycliffe's translation of the Bible, and its simple and effortless style had a happy effect on the development of English prose literature. Another important writer of this age was John Gover. John Gover wrote in three languages: French, Latin, and English. Gover's Confessio Amantis, written in English though having a Latin title, is a remarkable contribution to the beginning of truly English poetry. Gover used his knowledge of Greek, Roman, Hebrew, Italian, and French chronicles and stories to provide the subject matter of the poem. Tales of love and lovers, adventures and trials. The unvarying octosyllabic lines of the poem make it often tedious, but the author showed how stories from classical and early medieval mythology could be used effectively as subject matter for fresh and vigorous presentation in English verse forms. William Langland. He was a poet, a priest, and a social reformer. William Langland's Pious Plowman is written in unrhymed alliterative verse and is an allegorical poem. The vision is described as are a protest against the evils of the society, evils of the day. It is a political and religious allegory. It also gives the impression on the people of England. Its moral and religious purpose becomes clearer and stronger as it moves to the climax. The poem was very popular in Langland's day. Langland appears here at one and the same time to be visionary, an advocate for the Christian way of life, and an outspoken satirical critique of the corrupt practices he illustrates in his allegory. Langland is the ancestor of Benyon, to whom among English allegorists he makes a splendid second. Joffrey Chaucer. Joffrey Chaucer was the first great master of English song, called the father of English poetry. He wrote a number of poems: Troilus and Cressida, The Parliament of Fowls, The House of Fame, The Legend of Good Woman, the Canterbury Tales, but it is in the last named work that he is incomparably at his greatest and best. In the first place, the device which he employed as the framework of his stories in the Canterbury Tales is superior to every earlier device and has never been surpassed. Secondly, the character delineation of the immortal prologue is a marvel. Of all the character writers in English literature, from Ben Jonson to Wordsworth, none is so great as Chaucer. Chaucer is the greatest English storyteller in verse. At the same time, he rendered a great service to English versification. The easy flow and wondrous melody of his verse can be duly appreciated only by comparison with the work of his predecessors. Chaucer's Troilus and Cressida has been called the first English novel. Even though it is in verse, Chaucer's poetry is remarkable for its variety, its story interest, and its wonderful melody. It was all for today. In the next lecture, which I'm going to upload soon, we will discuss the various characteristics of this age of Chaucer and Chaucer's life and his major works. Thank you for having such a great patience.